the late 1970s, early 1980s, young men and boys started going missing in London, United Kingdom. Many of these men being gay or bisexual, but due to the views towards gay and bisexual men at the time, many of these missing person cases went uninvestigated. In 1983, a workman called to a residence in North London about a blockage in one of the drains. What he found shook the nation to its core. This is the story of the Muswell Hill murderer. Before we get into the video, if you enjoy strange, creepy and scary true stories, then you've come to the right channel. Please like, comment, share and subscribe for more weekly videos just like this. Five nights after Christmas, on the 30th of December 1978, 14-year-old Stephen Holmes had been to a pop concert in North London. Afterwards, heading to some pubs to try and buy some alcohol, but unfortunately for him, he was unsuccessful. The last pub he tried was the Cricklewood Arms. Here, he crossed paths with a 33-year-old man. Stephen was never seen again. Over the next 5 years, young men and boys went missing around London with no trace left of them. Unfortunately, due to the views towards gay and bisexual men at the time, and many of the missing men being gay or bisexual, many of these cases were not properly investigated, until, on February the 8th, 1983, residents of Cranley Gardens made a complaint about a blockage in one of the drains running down the side of the house. Dino Rod employee Michael CALTRAN responded to the complaint, arriving at the address and talking to a few residents. He realised he would have to take a look in the drain for the blockage. Upon opening the drain cover and inspecting the drain closer, Michael discovered a flesh-like substance and a few small bones. Seeing this, Michael became a little suspicious, so decided to call his supervisor Gary Wheeler to get his input on the find. By the time Gary had arrived, it was already getting late, so the two men decided to come back and continue the investigation the following day. As Michael and Gary were leaving, they spoke to two residents of the property the drain was on, Dennis Nilsen and Jim Alcott, about what they had found. Dennis Nilsen saying it looked like someone had flushed their KFC down the toilet. At 7:30 AM the following morning, Michael and Gary returned to continue their investigation into the blockage. Looking back into the drain, they realised that the drain had been cleared during the night. This made both the men very suspicious, so they searched in a pipe leading up to the top flat of the house and they discovered more small bones. Once they found this, the men called the police. The police quickly arrived to inspect the drain, and upon closer inspection they found more small bones and scraps of what looked like flesh. The remains they found were taken to Hornsey Mortuary, where Professor David Bowen informed them that the flesh they found had been from a human neck with a ligature mark visible. DCI Peter J and two other officers returned to the address, and after questioning some of the residents, police learned that the top floor flat from where the remains had been flushed belonged to Dennis Nilsen. DCI J and the two other officers decided to wait outside the house for Nilsen to get home from work, and after waiting for a few hours, Nilsen finally returned to the house. DCI J introducing himself and the two officers to Nilsen, stating they were here about the drains. Nilsen saying, "Since when have the police been interested in drains?" DCI-J replied, "Let's go upstairs and I'll tell you." All three men then followed Nilsen into his flat, the officers immediately noticing a strong rotting odour. Nilsen asked again, "What do police want with the drains?" DCI-J telling Nilsen they had found human remains in the drains. Nilsen acting shocked, saying, "Oh gosh, how awful." DCI-J moved closer to Nilsen, saying, "Don't mess about, where's the rest of the body?" Calmly, Nilsen replied, "The 2 plastic bags in the wardrobe," Nilsen pointing to a wardrobe. The officers then asked if there were any more body parts to find, to which Nilsen replied, "It's a long story, it goes back a long time. I'll tell you it all at the police station." DCIJ and the 2 officers then arrested Nilsen on suspicion of murder. On the way to the police station, the officers asked Nilsen if it was 1 or 2 bodies. Nilsen, staring out the window, calmly stated, 15 or 16 since 1978. Dennis Nilsen was born on the 23rd of November 1945 in Fraserburgh, Aberdeenshire, Scotland, having a brother Olaf Jr. and a sister Sylvia. When Nilsen started puberty, he realised he was gay, which confused him, and because of the views towards gay and bisexual men at the time, he decided to keep it to himself, although his brother suspected he was gay. At 14, Dennis joined the Army Cadet Force with hopes to join the British Army when he was able to. Dennis Nilsen then joined the Army and started as a chef September 1961. Nilsen ending his career with the rank corporal after 11 years with the Army. After the Army, Nilsen decided to join the Metropolitan Police, moving to London in December to start training. April 1973, Nilsen completes his police training and began his career as a police officer. Around this time, Nilsen started to visit gay bars in London, engaging in several casual encounters with men. In August, Nilsen's father passed away, leaving each of his 3 children £1,000. Then in December, Nilsen resigned from the police force. Between December 1973 and May 1974, Nilsen worked as a security guard, but this was on and off work, so he was looking for something more stable. He managed to get a job as a civil servant in 1974, working in a job centre in Denmark Street. 1979, Nilsen was promoted to executive officer, then in 1982 being moved to Kentish Town, staying in his job until his arrest in 1983. Nilsen had one serious relationship from 1975 to 1977 with a man named David. David later saying Nilsen was never violent towards him. The 2 men moving into Melrose Avenue together, later David moving out. Back to the day of Nilsen's arrest, Superintendent Chambers and DCIJ went back to Cranley Gardens to inspect the crime scene, removing the plastic bags from the wardrobe and taking them to Hornsey Mortuary. The 2 bags contained 2 torsos, a human skull, a severed head, a torso with arms but no hands, and a shopping bag filled with internal organs. On February the 10th, 1983, police interviewed Nilsen. In this interview, Nilsen told the police that there were more body parts in a chest in his living room and in a drawer in the bathroom. He said the body parts were 3 men, but he only knew one as John the Guardsman and could only remember the full name of one, Stephen Sinclair. He also confessed that at his old address, 195 Melrose Avenue, he had killed 12 or 13 young men, also stating he had tried but failed to kill around 7 other young men. Altogether, Nilsen confessed to 15 murders, starting with Stephen Holmes in 1978. The second victim was Kenneth Ockenden, a Canadian student on tour of the UK. On December 3rd, 1979, Kenneth met Nilsen at the Princess Louise pub in Holborn. Nilsen took Kenneth on a tour of London before persuading him to come to Nilsen's for food and drink. As Kenneth listened to a record, Nilsen strangled him to death. Third was Martin Duffy. On the 17th of May 1980, Nilsen met Martin at a London railway station. The 2 men went back to Nilsen's where Nilsen proceeded to strangle Martin to unconsciousness, then drowning him in his kitchen sink, before Nilsen bathed with the body. Nilsen kept Martin's body out for 2 more days, positioning him sat in chairs or laid on his bed while he spoke to him. Then Nilsen stored the body under the floorboards. On the 20th of August 1980, Nilsen met William Sunderland from Edinburgh, a 26-year-old father of 1, working as a part-time male prostitute at a pub near Piccadilly Circus. The two men went back to NILSEN'S and William was strangled to death, becoming NILSEN'S fourth victim. Fifth was a slender male prostitute in between 20 to 30 years in the Sailsbury Arms pub. Again, the two men went back to NILSEN'S and again NILSEN strangled the man to death. This man has never been identified by police. November 1980, NILSEN encounters a rough sleeper who had several missing teeth. The men get in a taxi to Melrose Avenue. That evening, while the man slept, NILSEN strangled him, becoming NILSEN'S sixth victim. NILSEN saying his legs were moving in a cycling motion while he was being strangled and that killing the man was as easy as taking candy from a baby. This man has never been identified by police. January 1981, NILSEN was in the Golden Lion pub in Soho where he met a blue-eyed Scot with blonde hair, NILSEN'S seventh victim. NILSEN invited the man back to Melrose Avenue for a drinking contest. NILSEN then strangled him to death, police never identifying him. February 1981, NILSEN met a man from Belfast in the West End after the pubs had closed. Again, the two men went back to Melrose Avenue where NILSEN strangled him to death, then stored him under the floorboards, becoming NILSEN'S eighth victim. September 18th, 1981, Malcolm Barlow, 23, from Sheffield, had an epileptic fit outside NILSEN'S residence. Upon discovering Malcolm, NILSEN helped him, taking him to get medical treatment. The following day, Malcolm returned to NILSEN'S to thank him, NILSEN inviting Malcolm in, then strangling him to death, and placing his body in a kitchen cupboard as he had run out of room under the floorboards, Malcolm becoming victim 9. NILSEN would keep the bodies of his victims at Melrose Avenue for as long as he could before decomposition would force him to have to get rid of them. To dispose of the bodies at Melrose Avenue, he would dissect the bodies before burning the remains in a bonfire at the bottom of the garden and throwing bags of internal organs out for wildlife to eat. NILSEN then moved to a top flat in a house in Cranley Gardens. March 1982, John Howlett, 23, from High Wycombe, known to NILSEN as John the Guardsman, was NILSEN'S 10th victim. NILSEN strangled John to unconsciousness, then drowning John in the bath. After that, NILSEN dismembered John's body, flushing flesh and internal organs down the toilet and throwing bones out in the rubbish. John Howlett being the first man to be killed at Cranley Gardens. September 1982, Archibald Allen from Motherwell, North Lancashire, met NILSEN in Shaftesbury Avenue, the two men going back to Cranley Gardens where NILSEN cooked Allen an omelette. While Allen ate the omelette, NILSEN strangled him to death, then being dismembered, with some flesh and bones being flushed down the toilet, later being found in the drain of the house. Allen was identified by dental records and became NILSEN'S 11th victim. On the 26th of January, NILSEN met Stephen Sinclair in Oxford Street. NILSEN bought him a burger, then the two men went back to Cranley Gardens. Stephen had a few drinks and an injection of heroin before NILSEN strangled him to death. Stephen's head, upper torso and arms were stored in a chest in the living room, his lower torso and legs stored beneath the bath, Stephen becoming NILSEN'S 12th and last victim. NILSEN also admitted to 3 other murders at Melrose Avenue, but he later said he made the 3 up. From the interview, police determined that NILSEN would strangle his victims to unconsciousness, then drown them before washing the bodies, dressing them in pants and socks, draping them over him while he talked to them. He would routinely prop them up in his chair like they were sitting or lay them on his bed and talk to them. He would stand or kneel over the body and masturbate, describing the bodies as his props for his fantasy. NILSEN was charged with the murder of Stephen Sinclair and transferred to HMP Brixton on remand. He was going to plead guilty to all charges, but 5 weeks before the trial, NILSEN dismissed his legal representative, Ronald Moss, deciding to be represented by Ralph Haim, then changing his plea to not guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility. October 24th, 1983, NILSEN was put on trial at the Old Bailey charged with 6 counts of murder and 2 attempted murder. November 3rd, 1983, Nilsen was found guilty of 6 murders and 1 attempted murder, sentenced to life with a recommendation he serve a minimum of 25 years.